Shiva, she said that at some appraisal or something you had heard that you were very good at networking, but it didn't actually come as, what can we say, something that felt so valuable at the time. And then you realize later that, oh my God, that is so valuable. That is the valuable thing. But can you share a little bit about how when you make things happen, and I have a feeling you do that a lot through that building relationship, can you share a bit more about that?
No, thank you very much, Kristin. Indeed, I mean, one thing that I have certainly over the years learned that attracts me or motivates me is actually change management or bringing, in fact, I wouldn't say maybe change management as much as developing new activities within large organizations. And here, you know, the power of connections, of knowing, you know, having different networks, not only within your organization but also outside, is quite powerful. And I've seen that now firsthand in my new role, where it was quite clear to me I'm moving from a very operational job to a different environment. But then all of a sudden, connections that had happened many, many years ago in very different activities where, you know, it wasn't also clear whether we would really ever cross paths again, became extremely relevant. And so this is where I would say I think the power of connection is really in the sense of, you know, you want to make sure that, you know, whenever you have an opportunity, you connect, you help each other. I think what I've also noticed is those connections were somewhere along the way you had an opportunity to work on something together, to help each other, whether it was a small or a bigger thing, you know, that creates a lasting bond. And I think, you know, we've all had that, because you never know when, you know, in a new situation, you may actually tap into it.
Yeah, and I was thinking about something, just, I want to help. You know, and how many of us we want to help each other, and then this thing happens. And somehow also in the past, the society has given not less value to that, but that is the valuable thing, that it comes from your heart in a way to want to help. Yeah. And then that will then in return help you too. So, yeah. But I think what was interesting, this thing that you might have all felt too, this feeling, you know, but what is actually really the good thing? Maybe it's not always valued. And you said that also, Nazir, that you've been doing the good thing, and then you had these people on your door.
I mean, we have to recognize there'll always be consequences. There'll always be people who don't like what you do, who just don't like you. Let's be clear about it. Particularly in the world we are now with social media and the like, you know, people they don't need an excuse to attack you. And you've got to find ways of being able to, coping mechanisms. And, you know, there's a program in England called Question Time, which comes out on Thursday night, and millions of people watch it. And the amount of abuse the panel gets is ridiculous. And I was on it just before, I've been on it a few times, but I was just on it before Christmas, and I reached out to all the people I know. Say some nice things about me, you know, to somehow balance all these people. And so you've got to be active. Yeah. You know, your point about networks, the networks don't just happen. Yep. You know, there wasn't a lawyers' minorities network, I set it up. There wasn't a prosecutors' minorities network, I set it up. There wasn't a hate crime panel in Greater Manchester or Northwest of England, I set it up. You know, you've got to, if there is a gap, you've got to, either you find others to help you with it, which, of course you have to find others to help you with it, but you know, you can't, we all seem to expect or wait for somebody else to start the ball rolling. And if we wait, we'll always be waiting, you know? Yeah. So if you've got the means, you know, go and do it. And additionally, Kristin, you know, there will be lots of like-minded people. Yeah. And nobody's asked them. Yeah. You know, the number of times I've felt almost ashamed or embarrassed to ask somebody for some help. Yeah. You know, I don't really know what I'm doing here, which is all the time. And they say, I can help you with that. Yeah. And I hadn't even thought to ask them, but I'm glad I did.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. I think that's a very key thing. And also, Gabrielle, you work in an organization, so to get the people to come along with you, what do you do?
Yeah, so for me in my role, a dialogue is essential. Yeah. And I think that, what I observe is that we put barriers in ourselves, as well as in our organization structurally. Right? Yeah. and that we need to go beyond that and reach out to the humanity in each other, right? This is what it is about. You know, and when I got assigned as regional ombudsman to the Sudan and that whole region, there was a welcome reception actually from Ban Ki-moon in New York for us. And he said to everyone there, he said, look, we're the UN, what were we doing? Bringing peace to the world, right? He said, how can we do that when inside we don't create peace? So he said, that's why I want these ombudsmen to come to, in this organization, make sure that we live inside our organization, what we bring to the world, because otherwise, how truthful is it, what we're doing out there, right? And I think, you know, this very old quote, whoever said it, like, you know, peace begins with yourself. And I think it's when we feel afraid and we contract and we don't reach out and we start demonizing someone else and gossip and negative, then that is the moment to catch yourself and reach out and have that dialogue, you know, reach out. I mean, Machiavelli said, you know, love your friends, but what is it? Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. But that's so true, right? It's so true, because if you think they're the enemy, that's just a concept in your head. And you need to get over that. You need to reach out. And yesterday evening I had this wonderful conversation, and sorry I forgot your name at the moment, I don't see it because it's a bit dark out there. But you know, what you set up in, by the way, Pakistan, Kashmir, and India there, is this dialogue. When I worked in the Middle East, it's about the dialogue between the Palestinians and the Israelis, for example, because, suddenly we're human beings, we've got something in common. Let's take it from there. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we're facing at this moment. And my contribution is at the beginning of that change, if you like, right?
So I want to quote Lorella Zanardo, who's been on this stage a few times, and she always says, if you're always popular, you're probably not creating change. I think that's such an interesting one. And Nazir, you mentioned something I thought was so interesting. So you said, when you saw that 18-year-old baby, you realized it's not just a job. I have a mission. That's what you said. So share with us a bit more about how I mean, you're still on mission. So what did it change from you in the way you work, also your drive, your whole thing?
Yeah, I think it was, you know, the difference between a mission and a job is that you are completely and utterly dedicated to it. You know, I'm patron of 9 charities, all of them women-led. You know, these are people, they're doing phenomenal work. Why is it that they spend 50% of their lives fundraising for doing 100% of what the government should be doing, you know? Yeah. And so what I try and do is support them and be their ambassador, open doors, access, whatever it may be. So that's, you know, I didn't have to do that. You know, and people always think, you know, hang on a minute, I haven't got time. Have you heard that one? I haven't got time. You know, or the one that says, you know, when somebody says to you, can you mentor me and support me? I haven't got time. Yeah. What does it take? An email, a phone call, a month, a year, a century, you know? It's not a lot, but we immediately put a barrier up. Yeah. And I you know, maybe to the chagrin of people around me, I never have that barrier. You know, I'm always keen to listen. I mentioned earlier on about listening. It's probably the most devalued or undervalued skill of a leader is listening. Yeah. We are good at talking. We're good at talking and delivering or whatever it may be, but we need to listen. And then when you're listening, and listening is not the same as hearing, listening, because something they will say will set you off in a different direction. Yeah. And that, I think, if you see your life as a mission, then you will do something with that, or you will find somebody else that can do something with that, because you know, we only have limited capacity. But in our networks, I have no doubt whatsoever we can find somebody immensely capable and doing something like this. And you know, you are, in terms of mission as well, my mother passed away during COVID, and she was 92, 96, same age as the Queen, actually. And I remember she was, because of COVID, you couldn't go and visit her. I went to visit her. She was at home receiving palliative care. And wearing a mask and everything. She goes, I'm going to die anyway, you know. take your mask off. I want to feel your hands. I want to see your face. And I'm massaging her feet. And I notice she's got really small feet. Size 3 feet. And my mother had been obviously with me all my life. I'd never noticed how small her feet was. And that was because she was a mountain to me. Her immense presence in my life has in many ways dictated the journey that I've taken. And we need to open our eyes to see that kind of thing.
Thank you for sharing that. Wow, yeah. So there's so many things to listen to, which is not only the voice, it's all of these things you mentioned. Wow, so I think Shiva is on some mission too. She wants to assure that the capital is a little better distributed, right? More gender, more sustainability, more of that. So how do you mobilize people to come with you, and how do you get that support?
So indeed, and before I forget, I would also like to maybe, and thanks for doing that, Gabriella, to also highlight, one thing we have done is mobilize three others from the EIB to join, and they're sitting actually here. So Kathy, Malise, and where's Yasmin? I don't know. Maybe she's I don't know whether she's in the room or not. In any case, but so one of the certainly my personal missions, which I've been working on basically since the beginning of my time at the European Investment Bank, has been actually on gender issues. First, I was active on the equal opportunity committees. But when I actually moved into the financing of innovative companies, I realized how few of our clients were women. And it really dawned on me increasingly as we then were in touch with, in the area of infectious diseases and global health, and we're talking now 2013-14, where actually most of the people that were active in, and I'm talking of like Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation or people in governments, were actually women. And I realized it's interesting that when you go into global health and a lot of the public-led initiatives, you have women, but then when we were dealing with the biotech companies, the pharma companies, mainly men. And that actually got me thinking, that we really need, as an EU institution, we definitely have a mission to come in where there is market failure, where capital is not distributed actually as efficiently, that there is a role. And I have to say, so we did actually, we took a hard look at the data. And I'm sure many of you have seen the data, but before COVID, it was 2% of global VC capital goes to women-led companies. I'm told the number has, if anything, gone down. If we look in Europe, the pool is potentially even smaller. And anecdotally, when we interviewed many women entrepreneurs and even women-led funds, they are struggling to actually have access to finance. Very much along the same ways that they very often have struggled in their careers to get the job. They feel that there is potentially a bias, that they are, so we sort of, and the report that we put out is on our website. It's, if you Google, why are women entrepreneurs underfunded? It's sort of a report that we put out to make the case. This actually has really, within the bank and also a subsidiary, led to a rethink in how we can, through maybe advisory, that's where my former job was, and maybe have a dedicated, and this was with the European Commission, a dedicated advisory window, because a lot of it is about, first of all, advising these women of where the potential sources of financing are, and maybe tap into the public sector, and then second, to really do an education also of the investor community. This is,
And I was thinking also today, because we in the morning we talked about, Miha was playing, and we were talking about this process of, in order to get that change to happen, you had to have some fire. No. And is it enough fire, to put it this way, in the topic? Because the funding is going down instead of going up, and we know more and more. Is there what can we do to get the fire in this?
I think what I have certainly seen is when you have then women entrepreneurs tell this, you have some of the most amazing stories right now out there of women entrepreneurs who have raised financing. You need to celebrate them, you need to raise their profile. And then, as we all have heard the term homophily, the more you have women investors, the more they will look at it. And that's where we are putting now a lot more emphasis. So in case there are, some of you who are looking for financing, try to also target maybe women-led funds or funds that have a strong gender focus. But indeed, I think this is very much, this is now a big topic in the financial community as part of the ESG. And basically what I'm telling always the private equity communities, there is a fear of missing out, because if you're not investing in these women-led companies, they are going to be your next big lost investment opportunities, and you don't want to have that. So a lot of it is about really hardcore investment decisions, not about nice to do.
Thank you. It's not easy, and there could be new ways of doing the whole thing, which we can talk about also. But Gabrielle, also in your work, it's about also getting people to move along in these thoughts of mediation, and you're operating in many conflict zones, as you said. So how do you mobilize the people to believe in this is being a good idea, so to speak?
I wish I knew. Look, what you see typically in organizations, I'll give you for instance, so I arrived in visiting the peacekeeping mission in the Sudan. So I was in the headquarters, South Sudan this was. So I was headquarters in Juba, I arrived, blah, blah, blah. And I came in, and then they said to me, well, local staff is on strike. Why? Because a local staff and a national staff were in a fist fight. I said, oh, that sounds not so good. So I said, so to the head of the mission, a woman, by the way, and the Secretary General said, so what do you do about it? Well, they did what they thought that you have to do, right? So the rule books, wrote the rule book. It is prohibited to hit each other, right? The code of conduct of the UN says, civil behavior, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so did that help? What? Not really. So then we come to listening, what Nazir also said. I said, let me listen to the people. Let me just get them around. Let me listen. So I listened to the people involved, the two guys actually involved in this hand thing, and to other people, and I got a good mix of everyone. And I said, so what do you need in this organization that things improve? And that you work together again and better, and that's the questions then you need to ask, and then you need to listen, because they have all the solutions. So I came out with a plan of 14 suggestions that the staff had made. And 2.5 years later, the head of the mission said to me, Gabrielle, she said, we've implemented everything now. so it's, and we forget that, don't we? We forget that. So if we're in these institutions and we stick only to our HR manuals and rules and compliance and risk management and all that gobbledygook, right? And then we forget that there is also people with expertise and insight, who actually choose to work for your company and your organization. Like in WFP, who want to be humanitarian, be out there and leave the families, back at home where they are out there, ducking the bullets by a matter of speaking, right? So, and then, you better be interested in them. So I feel quite strongly about that. At the same time, of course, we also need to be aware that the organization is there with a mission itself. So it's important that you are also connected to that and see yourself as part of the whole contributing to that, right? So, and if we can get that balance, and if we can also, dialogue more about that, talk about more about that, what it means to us, and then we come to values as well in our organizations. I think a lot of these issues that we face at work will be solved, right? Yeah. But I think also there's one very big problem that we're still facing, and I think we're slowly in a transition of that, which is, ego is the biggest enemy, right? So ego is just like the hierarchy, promotion, money, my car's bigger than yours, because I have a job group higher than whatever, my husband got this issue. With one of the people, said, why have you got that car? Oh, well, and if we stop also that, the ego stuff exit, and I think that's slowly happening, and we're going into what I'm actually here for, what John also talked about too. What is it that I contribute to the whole, right? When we're on this planet, You know, what is it that I have in me that I want and have to share? So, and that is also following, you know, your inner source and your feeling. And I think that is such a challenge for us as humanity to work from there.
Thank you. So, living in this particular moment in history where the best of technology is around, and we want to assure that the finest humanity is also expressing itself, let's say. What is then, in this time, leadership? And what is it leadership for you, Nazir?
There are a number of things, I guess. One is leading by example. So I won't ask anybody to do something that I don't feel able to do myself. I think you've got to, you know, why would they? You know, we'll give you a bit more money. No, that's not. The best incentive is I'm prepared to do it. So I think that's one. I think being enthusiastic and passionate, and you know, what we talked about, I think that's a leadership trait. Achieving results. There's no point being a leader if you don't do anything. You don't achieve anything. Yeah. You're not really a leader either, are you? Developing other people. When I left prosecuting, 6 of the 13 chief prosecutors were people I mentored. And 5 of them were women. You know, so you pick them, you pick them is not the wrong word. You talent spot them, you support them, you give them whatever coaching, whatever they need. So, you know, developing others is a key thing, and building relationships. Yeah. I think a leader who doesn't build relationships is not a leader. You know, and also you're not a leader without having followers. Yeah. What's the point? So I think we have to recognize that you've got to show the way to people. Yeah. But you don't know, and I think the point you made, Gabrielle, I don't have all the answers. In fact, I have 10% of the answers. Yeah. But somebody somewhere will have the answers. Yeah. And so if you build those strong relationships, I mean, you know, people here, were meeting people for the first time, I hope that you will take email addresses, phone numbers, you know, whatever it is. And you know, if at some point you think I've got an issue around the food program, I know exactly who to message. You know, but we often work in silos, and we Google stuff rather than actually thinking we've built a relationship with somebody. You know, I've built a great relationship with Slovakia. You know, and you know, you're able to get to people that you wouldn't know, and slowly but surely. And the other thing about, you know, you mentioned being Chancellor of Manchester University. We have 550,000 alumni around the world in major senior roles, or not even major roles. And it's a waste if you're not engaging with people all sorts of places and giving them an opportunity to contribute and feedback. So I think all of those things.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned also that you didn't have many role models when you grew up, and I think that's very interesting for many. I mean, did you have any role models? I mean, in your leadership, do you feel you are the first one? Are you pioneering? What do you feel?
Yes, no, indeed. Maybe perhaps I would like to briefly add something, and then, you know, as we were talking, I think for me also and I think you implied it, is trust. That not only you know, you have people trust you, but also you create a trusting environment. And what I certainly have felt has been always extremely helpful is creating a psychologically safe or psychological safe space for people to actually challenge also, you know, you and leaders in general. This is not an easy task, and we've all seen, you know, the group think and power to truth to power problems. But I certainly believe, and I think women, I have felt over the years, can be quite good at that, creating that safe space in creating a very inclusive environment, and actually looking for the devil's advocates out there, you know, in your, you know, people who actually will challenge you, because I think we all have blind spots, which we very often, you know, we may not even know that they are there, or we don't want to see them, and having people who in that trusting environment help you. So that's, but to your point about role models, I mean, I had early on in my career role models that were in a very cutthroat environment, the sort of women who actually made it in a man's world, and I have to say that impacted me a lot. Probably when I look back, for maybe, I mean, there was some, because we had to, certainly in the 90s on Wall Street, you had to conform. There was really no diversity and inclusion talk. It was much more about, getting to the corner office and playing the man's world's rules and so on. What I have realized over the years, increasingly I'm really drawn to women that I feel have managed to bring their feminine very much into the, and right now if you ask me who are, I mean, they are not people that I know, but I see them as fascinating people are, for instance, Christine Lagarde, and I know Kristin knows that I always mention her because I find she has this really interesting way of operating in the men's world. Also the IMF managing director, now her name is a Bulgarian lady, Gorgeva Kristalina, or Kristalina Gorgeva, I think. I find these women, and also the World Trade Organization lady, these women are to me fascinating. And Madeleine Albright, I should also say, which I don't know whether you have read her story, life story. I find the way she communicated was fascinating.
Thank you. What about you, Gabrielle?
Role models for me?
Yeah, exactly.
No, interesting question. Been thinking about that. I was like, okay, the Dalai Lama, because I'm not very even, and my team can probably testimony to that. So I'm a bit moody, and then I always think to myself, okay, so what would the Dalai Lama do? And so that's certainly role model. But then somebody said, well, that's a bit high for you to achieve, Gabrielle. So I'm still looking for another one then. And then the other one was Margot Fonteyn, because, before...
Ballet dancer.
Sorry?
The ballet dancer.
Yeah, the ballet dancer. Yeah, absolutely. No, because, she defied gravity, stayed in a job when everyone thought that she couldn't anymore, and danced around the world with a younger man. So, and, so I thought that was a very good idea as well. No, but I loved classical ballet, so, and I wanted to be a ballerina, but, so that was my first job failure, so to speak. But role models, I think, for me always is those people who can stay connected. Have the heart, mind connection, and are courageous. I like courage. So there's a lot of courageous people around. Also here, I've talked to many already, and that always inspires me. If you want to think outside of the box and take leaps, and I think women are in general very courageous because, there's fewer privileges, there's fewer things handed out. I remember I once, and then depending where you come from, I'm just spoiled Western bred. But I once worked also with a refugee from Nicaragua. And she said that in her country and in her family, she was not allowed to sit down at the table as the youngest female child. And she was given scraps because, the female children can only eat once all the males have eaten, So that was, you start realizing that. You start realizing that. And then it's like, so if they were managing their lives and enjoy every day the beauty that also life is giving us, then what am I to moan about little things, first world problems that we have so many of. And I think this is also what I see is more and more resonating, right? That we're looking at, so what are actually the real things in life that I want to connect myself to? Yeah. And how can I, because one of the things I read that is also interesting, it's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. That's a book, it is in the 80s.
Yes.
And it's very interesting. So, and there's so much truth in that, because it's all in our head, isn't it? Barriers, fear, I have no time, this and that. So I think if we support each other, there's that whole concept of coaching and mentoring, but being there, looking out. So also I get very sick of this whole concept of, we're family in our organizations. I talked with one of you about this also. We're not family, we're community. A community really looks out for each other. In a community, you know who's who is having a hard time. Community knows who's just lost their job. In the community, you know, who needs to care. In the community, you know, who's got the money and could also, you know, contribute to some of the things that the community needs, right?
Yeah.
So, and if we look at that, it's a very different. Well, okay, shall I
Super,
stop here?
yes, thank you. Yeah.
Sorry.
We got a little wide. Because I wondered if Teresa and Ramona, if you can get some microphones, perhaps, and we can do some questions. You already have them. Oh, that's so great. So are there any questions in the room? And if so, can you raise your hand? There are no questions. But maybe there are questions online. Jimena, can you help me if there are no questions online? But we can ask now. Hey, can you, if you have some questions, it would be great. If not, there's one question over there. I have a few more questions if there are no other questions.
Hello, hi. Oops, sorry. I'm Lucia, and I want to ask, like, when you do something and it takes sacrifices from you, how do you deal with that? Or how do you find, like, strength to go through, you know, having the police car in your door because, or any others?
Was that aimed at? I think it was me. Again, it goes back to networks, people around me that I remember my PA when I was being bombarded with correspondence and horrible stuff. She would be running down the corridor, don't show him, you know. So they provided a level of gatekeeping and which was important to do that. Additionally, I was blown away by the people reaching out to me. You know, I'm not going to get political here, but my boss at that time was the current leader of the opposition in England, so maybe the next prime minister. And he said, Nazir needs to do the school run. He needs to not be at conferences, he needs to be at home because his family are under attack. And he told everybody in the organization to make that happen, to provide me with the space to protect my family. Now, I don't know if I needed it, but the important thing is that somebody else thought of that.
Yeah.
And, you know, so it's really important to I think, show vulnerability. You mentioned about, you know, people don't necessarily want their ego get in the way of how great they are and fantastic they are. You know, my memoir, which came out 2-3 years ago, is just me being vulnerable. I'm saying I messed up here. I didn't do this very well, because it's important to recognize that you've come from a place, that you didn't arrive here. You know, you came from a place, and I think people warm to that vulnerability. You go into a room and say, "I'm sorry." I remember, Kristin, there was a prosecutor case involving an Indian student who was murdered in England. His family came over. They had spent £30,000 to send him to England to study. He was their only son. They were totally dependent upon this boy, and he was murdered by a gang member. And I prosecuted the gang member, and the mother comes up to me, and she kisses my hand. And she says, "Thank you for doing what you're doing." And I started crying in the courtroom. And I looked at her and I said, "Why are you thanking me? You've lost everything." You know, and I think when you have that kind of conversation with somebody, that gives you a sense of, your place. And then the next thing I did was contact the Indian government, and they writ off the debt to make sure that family didn't have the debt that they just picked up the child. So I did something, but at the end of the day, it was I realized that I can't fix everything. I can't do everything, but somehow you will find somebody that can help you do that. And it goes back to the mission thing. I don't know how long we've got. You know, I don't know whether I'm not talking about 10, 12 minutes. I'm talking about in terms of life.
Yeah.
So why wait till tomorrow? Yeah. Will there be a tomorrow? You know? And I think we've got to recognize that whatever time we have, you know, make the most of that, whether it's through joy, through laughs, love, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, don't waste a day.
Thank you. Any other questions from the group? Otherwise, I have one. Don't be shy, yeah. That was there's a question. Can you raise up if you have a question so we can see you and wave your hand? It's a little bit dark.
Hear me? Oh, great.
Yes,
okay.
there you go.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey, and you've mentioned about the importance of your networks. And we, as a planet, have had such a difficult time in the last couple of years. And I was wondering how your networks have helped you, support you when we couldn't meet each other physically.
Yeah. You want to start, Shiva?
Yeah, I mean, I think indeed, I think for those of us who had actually networks, this was, in my view, a saving grace, because we managed to rather quickly, I mean, those of us who had the ability to then to connect through all sorts of media, I felt that actually was very efficient to network with people you already had at least met once. And one of the persons in the room is Walter. I think Walter and I just met before COVID. And somehow, you know, with having had all of a sudden the time to, you know, to connect, I saw actually for a lot of us, we had more time to connect to those we knew. I think and to me, the lesson learned was, I think to your point, grab opportunities when they come, because you never know when we're again maybe in a lockdown or not having the ability to have these human connections, because I felt that the digital connection worked much better when there was some human connection earlier. And therefore, investing in your network or in the people, you know, while you can through human, you know, encounters like this is golden. I think what we should all hopefully do is help our children and the younger generation to understand the value of that, because they suffered the most, I think, during the COVID years, because they could not in their universities, in their you know, early career years, have that benefit. And I think here it is really so important that we all help them to do that and actually make it also easier for them to connect with us and others, because they lost out.
That's a good point. Let's be really present right now to reach out, because we don't know what's around the corner. We learned that with the COVID, right? So that's just a good point. And also, I want to share this too, because this thing of taking the moment and ring fence what you really want to do. Because I was speaking to somebody yesterday, I wish I was at WIN. And I said, why aren't you at WIN? No, I'm so busy. But you just told me you loved it so much, so why aren't you here? No, because I have to do something. That didn't seem so important. So if we are training ourselves in doing what we love, you know, because we can hold ourselves back from our mission, back from what we do too. Anyway, any more people want to comment on her question?
I think it's the point about, I learned a new skill. I learned how to write books.
Yeah.
You know, we made the most. If you were living I mean, I don't have a solitary life. I have 4 children, for crying out loud. But I think it was important to use the time. I mean, I mentioned my mother passing. My brother died from COVID. So I had a lot to deal with. But at the same time, I realized it was an opportunity to invest in myself.
Yeah. That's another thing. What have we learned? And it's a good thing to share that also, I think, during this event here, what we have learned over the past 2 years. Are there any questions? Otherwise, we can even talk about. There's a question in the back.
Okay, Teresa said I should stand like in school. So
yeah, good. We see you better then.
Okay, so fantastic, really, all 3 of you, really inspiring. But I want to be a bit pragmatic here. I'm going to talk tomorrow, so that's another story. But you know, everything that we talk about and the change we want to achieve all falls through if the support, not just in the terms of mentoring or just the financing, doesn't come through, right? Last year has been super challenging because I just closed my first seed round for my second company. So I know this whole process, and I must say that this is the first time last year I have felt being a woman is a disadvantage. I've never felt that before, strangely enough. Being colored or a minority is a disadvantage, even to the smartest of people in the room who I was pitching to at different conferences and, you know, private events and so on. So my question sort of is, it's great what you're saying about, you know, opening doors and being resilient and all that, which I think we all are doing in a certain way. And then Shiva saying, you know, there is institutional funding you can go to, you know, you should go. But the thing is, the system is so complex. how do you navigate that? Any of you can take the question. I don't mind. I think each of you bring your own wisdom into it. But I think sometimes when we speak from a position of having done that and seen through that and having walked through the doors, sometimes I feel like the starting process, is really hard, right? So I wonder, how do you pragmatically navigate that, is my question. Sorry for the long, but just wanted to give you a little context.
Thanks. And a short answer from many of you.
Everyone's looking at me suddenly. I don't know anything about finance or something. But no, that's not true, actually. What I can say is this. It's so important that we also don't become all these Pollyannas. It's all about never giving up and you will find and follow. No, it's also not that. It's also about very disciplined. Chop wood, carry water, and then you do that, and the fire won't start, and there's never enough water, and your bucket has holes, right? You still got to do it again and again, and for some, that's even harder than for others, as you just shared with us, right? So, but keep doing it, because what I see is that we become more and more aware that we're there to support each other. We're becoming more and more aware that privileges are unequally distributed around the world. And we're becoming more and more aware that we need to be there to help each other. And I think that there will be that shift. So,
thank you. So take one little short answer from each of you. Because
to be very pragmatic, where are you? So I would suggest you speak to Kathy Bender, who is heading our Innovation Finance Advisory on the digital side, but in that team, we cover also the green technologies, emerging sectors, so that we can actually connect you up potentially with other women who are actually in your field, have raised financing, can guide you, because absolutely, I think it's important that you are, that you get solutions. And so that's, I think, as pragmatic as I can get right now. And speak to me as well if you...
I think the other thing that needs to be said is that you sounded a lot like you accept the status quo, that men rule the world, that because we're a certain color, we will not be given. That is the reality, but we did challenge that. And there's not days go by where I've lost hundreds of male friends because they're misogynistic, sexist bastards. And I'll say it to their faces and they walk away. But hopefully some of them will think, I need to change myself. But those individuals or the groups that you mentioned may not change because they've never been confronted about the route they take. And we're in Rome now. Until 500 years ago, everybody assumed that the universe revolved around the Earth. Remember that? And then Galileo came around and said, no, the Earth goes around the sun, and he was persecuted for that. I think men need to realize the universe doesn't revolve around them. Right? Yeah. We need our Galileo moment.
Yeah, thank you. It's and also I think this thing, we heard it earlier this morning from Taco also, who have been working on this topic for so long. And where is the progress? I'm trying another way with my heart and my art and my painting. And I would say a little bit this same thing, sitting in this position here of 25 years, and all the short-term funding, all the energy you have to do for that in order to do the work of actually empowering and inspiring women is out of proportion. And you wonder, and there was a time you wonder, is there something with me? Is this not good enough? Or maybe you feel guilty even for not doing it good. And that's the typical women thing, maybe I did something wrong or wasn't good enough. But normally women, and of course many men, do perfect thing, just like we are the best in school now, all over the place. So it's not anything wrong with you. But we also need to really step it up, as you said, and say, and then we need to help each other also, really. Go and buy from her products. You see what I mean? Tell your friends to do it. Buy from women entrepreneurs, support, share, do. Because sometimes I'm a bit surprised that we don't do more of that. That's the same with sustainability. Okay, you want that, chicken that is wild and free. Okay, buy from that, even if it costs a few cents more. We need to actually use our power, and we have power through our money, through our voice, through our listening. And I think that is so important in this time. So with that, we are coming to a close of this session. And I thank all of you who've been watching. I don't see any questions here, no more questions. Are there any messages before we close? I think so. Teresa, can I ask you to come? You can just sit here while we have the messages. But maybe we give you a warm applause for all of your sharing of your knowledge and the wonderful things. And thank you.